Okay, sorry about that, folks. I'm having stupid technical issues. I should be back in a second. There we go. Hopefully you can see me now and hear me now. I don't know why it started doing that. I know it's all good what we're doing. It's just annoying. It's like, why is it starting doing this thing which it had been doing before? And certainly, at least I saw just before I had to reset. Agree to disagree. I respect your opinion. I just don't agree with it. And that's a long theological argument we could get into another time if we wanted to. But the thing you find with Judaism that particularly got it in trouble, among other things, I should say, is two ideas, one of which is completely ridiculous, the other one of which I sort of understand at least. So the thing I could sort of understand is that Jews got blamed for the Black Death, the bubonic plague. And the reason for this is pretty simple. In the religion of Judaism, ritual washing and cleanliness are a really big deal. This is something that, thanks to Christ, actually Christianity largely dropped. But in Judaism, we wash your hands. It's an important part of religious ritual. You have to be clean. And for that matter, Christianity in many cases associated with cats, I know the prophecy movies, they're absolutely brilliant. But Christianity associated cats with witchcraft, often killed them, didn't keep them as pets. Jews sometimes did. All of which led to Jews were slightly less susceptible to the Black Death and various other plagues of the Middle Ages than Christians because they kept cleaner. They kept their areas of the city, because they were usually forced to be segregated, cleaner. So for very understandable medical reasons, they didn't get sick as often. They didn't catch the same diseases as often. But Christians saw this and jumped to the illogical conclusion, understandable but illogical conclusion, the Jews were causing the plagues. And it became one more excuse of many to unfairly persecute the Jews. The other thing, which is completely stupid, and is a myth that continues to this day to my utter infuriation, is what's known as the blood libel. In the Middle Ages, it's from the Middle Ages onward, people have had this idea that in the time before Passover, Jews would steal babies, particularly on Christian babies and unbaptized babies, ritually murder them, and then mix the blood of these babies into the Passover wafers, the bread. Anyone who knows anything about Judaism's dietary laws should be rolling their eyes at this point, because in Judaism, a huge law, one of the big laws in kosher, is you cannot consume blood. Period. Blood is, to quote Dracula, who is in fact quoting the Bible, the blood is the life. God commanded that his followers not consume blood. The idea that they would mix blood into religious food for one of their most important religious holidays, Passover, is ridiculous. This pisses me off, partly because Hitler dragged up this idiotic story to justify the Holocaust, and partly because anti-Semites in the United States and around the world today still drag this nonsense up. It's ridiculous. It doesn't happen. But these two associations have given Judaism, particularly in the Middle Ages, a dark reputation that's continued to this day. They do not worship demons. It's the question of do they believe in demons is a really complicated one. And the answer really comes down to it depends on which sect of Judaism and which point in history. But the simple version is, yes, Jews did in fact believe in demons. They don't they didn't Jews historically and today generally don't associate Satan as a demon. They associate Satan as an angel. In Judaism, basically, Satan, when God's, the perfect example of this is the book of Job in the Old Testament, where God is talking about how righteous and loyal and faithful Job is, and Satan goes, "Oh, no, wait a minute. But in that story, Satan is in heaven. Satan is interacting with God. Satan is not an enemy of God. He's accusing man. He is essentially the prosecuting attorney. God is saying, look how wonderful and perfect my creation is. And Satan is going, no. What about this? Maybe Satan was the original whataboutism. But they did certainly have beliefs about, I figure they called Asmodeus, Beelzebub, or Baalzebub, Lilith, Dybbuk, Shedem, and all these other beings that that, if for all intents and purposes, would qualify as demons in a Christian sense. Dybbuks in particular, there's this modern notion of a Dybbuk as the soul of a evil human who has unfinished business and can't move on, that possesses a human body to carry out that unfinished business so that they can pass on to the next life. That's actually a very late interpretation of what Dybbuks are. The word Dybbuk itself originally simply meant an unclean spirit. That had a far more demonic connotation. But again, they didn't worship demons. Nor am I claiming that they worship demons. They just believed they existed in the same sense Christians believed they existed. And the reality is, it's not unusual. A lot of the major religions of the world have demonic figures, some of which have very similar traits to Christianity. These figures are not worshipped in these religions, is the important point I'm trying to make here, though. There's Hindus have malevolent beings, but they don't worship those beings any more than Christians worship Satan. Even malevolently seeming that's a whole other issue about what the nature of a cult is. While I have the utmost respect for Stephen Hassan's bite model, it's really describing what more properly, in my opinion, would be called the destructive cult, because sociologists, historians, religious studies, theologians, people who study comparative religion, things like that, all have very different ideas of what the word cult means. I personally dislike pinning it down that hard and saying that this is what a cult is, just by virtue of there's a lot of groups that have been called cults that fit many of the historical definitions of what a cult is, that don't fit Hassan's bite model. So I prefer the idea between there's a cult, which I would use a traditional sociological definition of, which is a new religious movement that is different from societal norms. So by that definition, for example, Wicca, particularly in the 1940s, could be considered a cult because it was new. It was very different than Christianity, Judaism, and the other major religions of Europe. But there's nothing negative about that connotation. On the other hand, there is the idea of a destructive cult or a controlling cult, which would be something like Nixium or Heaven's Gate or People's Temple, aka Jonestown. And those certainly fit very well into the bite model. Not all destructive cults are suicide cults. That's important to note as well. Also, one of the other favorite definitions I've seen over the years of what a cult, of what should and shouldn't be considered a cult, and the one I usually use on this channel, because of the fact I don't want to demonize other people's beliefs, even if I don't agree with them, is the one that law enforcement uses. Law enforcement defines a cult as a religious group that engages in criminal activity. If they haven't done anything illegal, you don't call it, at least in law enforcement, in theory, don't call it a cult. So, again, or I ain't touching that. This is not a political channel. I don't agree with you at all, but I'm not going there. But that particular concept, I think is a very good one. And the thing is, a lot of the cults I think that fit Hassan's bite model do fall into that definition of a cult. I would definitely consider Scientology a cult. In fact, it fits that definition. One of the largest espionage attacks ever carried out by the U.S. government was carried out by the Church of Scientology. They stole a lot of government documents about themselves. And this isn't a great secret. This is well documented. I also don't approve of their methods in general. The way that it's essentially almost a pyramid scheme of paying money into the cult to rise up through the ranks. What I know of their beliefs is fairly ridiculous. Maybe that's a good topic for me to go into greater detail with, because I've never done a deep look into Scientology. Because what I've heard enough to go, this is ridiculous. I'm not interested in going further. But if I really want to talk about it, I prefer to do the research. Yes, but the short version is yes, I absolutely agree that Scientology is dangerous. Their tendency, the points I could point to call them dangerous is the espionage attack they conducted against the U.S. government, the way that they have targeted and harassed anyone who questions them in any way, shape, or form, by lawsuits, by bullying, by all sorts. Yeah, I'm aware. I'm willing to take the risk of other often borderline illegal activity. They're one of the sue happy groups in the United States or in the world, really, certainly. No, I understand what you're saying, Lisa. And for that matter, they have their own addiction treatment program and their attacks on the entire concept of psychiatry. R asks an interesting question. Do I think it's possible for any new magic to be discovered and come into existence? I mostly think that magic is a force that we just figure out how to use in different ways. My friend Arthur Moyer, and again, if you're interested in magic, I would certainly suggest checking him out sometime. He's been on the show a couple of times, and he's a very nice guy. But Arthur has a very unique approach to magic that's similar to chaos magic, if nothing else, but it's really its own thing called omnimancy, which deals with more instead of summoning spirits to do things trying to figure out how spirits do magic and then doing the job yourself. Chaos magic is also interesting in that it generally divorces itself from the idea of summoning spirits and things of that nature. Particularly what I find fascinating in chaos magic is this idea that as I understand chaos, and I'm by no means an expert, the symbolism you place on the beings that you call on and the symbols that you use in your magic is more important than if they actually exist. So you can find chaos magicians who work with superheroes from comic books, that work with the creatures of the Lovecraft mythos, just because that's how they connect to magic. Not because those things are objectively real, but it's a useful social construct, at least as I understand it. I'm probably butchering the concept. I am not a magician, chaos, or otherwise. But you don't need a specific set of rituals to do magic. Magic is really more about intent. But I'm going to be wrapping up soon. There's at least one other topic I wanted to address, and then I wanted to get back into this whole will I die tonight because of a black magic curse. So the one last thing I wanted to address to give an idea of the fact that there are people cute Lord Road, I approve, that get into very dangerous practices in parts of the world associated with magic. Although this is something I talk about with caution. I'll explain why in a minute. But there's this idea that in some parts of Africa called medicine killings, where practitioners will murder human beings, sometimes children, sometimes adults, I believe, to harvest their organs. They believe that by harvesting these organs, they will be able to create magical cures for various diseases, to help with various social problems, like not having enough money, that they sell for a great deal of money to rich businessmen and things like that. This is a real problem in the world, unfortunately. Why I hesitate to bring this up is I have seen it used to justify something else that is horrific. In parts of the Middle East, in parts of Africa, in parts of Guinea, in parts of other places in the world, witch trials are still going on. Innocent people, sometimes just children, are thrown out of the tribes, are thrown out of their societies, are ostracized, sometimes executed, under the ridiculous belief that they are practicing black magic. And this practice, in my opinion, absolutely needs to stop. Again, children, small children are accused and kicked out and forced to live in deplorable conditions because supposedly they're using stricter magic to hurt people. That is not an acceptable line of thought. I believe that curses are a real thing, but the reality is there's a great deal you can do to protect yourself. Every religion has its rituals of cleansing and protection. For example, for Christians, there are a pair of prayers that are particularly good. One of which is the St. Michael's prayer. The other one is St. Patrick's Breastplate. I particularly like St. Patrick's Breastplate because it calls for Christ in front of me, Christ behind me, Christ above me, Christ below me, Christ within me, Christ to the left of me, Christ to the right of me. I think it's a very beautiful prayer for protection against negative forces that will work well against curses. You can also look for a book called Curse, Blessing or Curses You Decide, which I think is a very interesting meditation on the whole subject, just because not just does he discuss magical curses, but he talks about our words and what we choose to say and how we should be mindful of that. He makes the argument that sometimes just by saying things we can curse another person without meaning to. I don't necessarily agree with that principle, but I do certainly agree that we should be mindful of what we say. Even what we say only to ourselves. And what we wish upon others. There are psychological reasons why those are potential issues. But we've gone between the two streams, since I had to restart to my unending irritation. We've gone well over an hour at this point, so it's probably a good point to wrap things up. I will respond very briefly to Lord Ruin, who asked me if Sam and Dean would make good demonologists. Not Sam and Dean so much. They're entirely too quick to kill possessed people. I love the show Supernatural, but it's like, really, guys? You remember how in the early seasons you practice exorcisms instead of murder? Bobby, on the other hand, would be a good demonologist. I've occasionally jokingly, and not entirely jokingly, commented that I'm sort of a non-red neck version of Bobby. So that's going to wrap it up. I again going to touch very briefly on this idea of, have I been cursed? Well, the reality is that it is now 7:14 on Sunday, the night that I was supposed to... Kidding. Come on, we have to have a little fun with this nonsense. But on the night I'm supposed to die. And yet here I am. If somebody says they're going to curse you, 9 times out of 10, they're probably full of themselves. I would agree with Vita that words have energy. If you think someone's cursed you or someone's threatening to curse you, Do prayers and meditations based on your own religious beliefs to protect yourself, and don't worry about it. Because here's the other thing to realize about being cursed, and I really should do an episode about curses as well, is belief has power. There's a very real medical phenomenon known as psychosomatic death, or my vastly preferred name for it, voodoo death. People who strongly, truly believe that they're going to die, die. There are studies on this. Your immune system will shut down. You will be more likely to get disease. You'll become more accident prone. Just because you believe you're going to die. If you believe, particularly very common in cultures where belief in magic is more widespread, people who believe they're going to die, or believe they're cursed, will get sick and die because they convince themselves that it's true, even if they weren't actually cursed. So if you think you were cursed, do not panic about it. It may have happened. I'm not discounting the entire idea. But what you believe is important in magic. What the person who's cursing you believes is important in magic. Keep going. Don't look at every negative thing that happens as confirmation of the fact you'll be cursed, or you're going to fall into confirmation bias. Keep a positive attitude, especially around the person who you think cursed you. Because if they become convinced the curse didn't work, that can cause trouble for them. Because again, belief is a large part of magic and why magic works. I am not afraid. I am entirely certain I will join you again next week for a new episode on some topic or other I haven't decided yet. Remember to follow us on Facebook at The Paranormal Encyclopedia. If you enjoyed this episode, if you like what I'm doing, please consider commenting, and subscribing. If you happen to have a couple of dollars that are just burning a hole in your wallet and you're like, my money isn't working for me, you could consider going to our Patreon, patreon.com/demonology. Link will be in the description. I'm adding it now because I just realized I forgot. And donate us a couple of bucks. We'd appreciate it. I cannot promise that it will protect you from curses, but I can't guarantee it wouldn't either. I'm kidding, obviously. Also, if you or someone you care about is, in your opinion, being under demonic attack or under a curse or anything of the sort, please do not hesitate to reach out. My email is in the description. I will get back to you. Email is probably the most reliable way to reach me. But I do read it on a daily basis. I do respond. I will be happy to help you if I can, or refer you to someone. If I can't, the reality is I live in New Jersey in the United States. If you live in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, Maryland, I can come out and help you. If you live in Japan, I'm probably going to try and help you find a group in Japan because I can't afford to fly to Japan as much as I might like to. But the point is, there's somebody out there who can help you if you feel you're under any kind of spiritual attack. Do not give up hope. Do not be afraid. Thank you all for joining me. This is one of the most active chats I've ever had in the history of the show, and I really appreciate that. Again, tune in next week when we'll be talking about something. I promise I don't know what. But until then, I'm going to say goodnight, everybody, and God bless, and I'll see you next week.